pretty much hot topic. We were talking about the New York Giants, Jaxson Dart, Cam Skattebo, even a little Abdul Carter in there, even though we're really just talking about offensive rookies today. We'll throw him in there as well. Now, the first thing I want to say about Jaxson Dart, Cam Skattebo, especially after the loss to the Denver Broncos, I feel like, again, whoever is listening to this, I feel like you don't necessarily know like what living in New York and watching New York football from week to week is like. We all know, everybody knows across the country, Giants, Jets, they have been a disaster. But like watching week from week of it, it's like it like really opens your eyes watching four quarters every week. And again, that's what happened with the Denver Broncos. Again, they had an historic comeback, and again, another New York team falls. But Jaxson Dart, Cam Skattebo, everybody has said it. You could hear it from podcast to podcast, wherever you listen to. They have brought life to the New York Giants. Now, us, luckily, did see Jaxson Dart's debut. He did really well in that debut. And again, I feel like they really had no choice in New York Giants. I mean, I was a proponent. We argued about it, about Jaxson Dart starting day one. But if we're being honest here, Jaxson Dart had to come in very quickly. Russell Wilson really did not look good in basically any of his starts. I guess the Giants start, he played really well. But then again, threw one of the worst balls I've ever seen to cost them the game. There was really no room for Jaxson Dart to really learn, I guess, for half the season or whatever. They needed him to come in. He has looked really good now. I feel like he's one of those guys where the statistics aren't showing the whole story. I guess his best statistical game was last week, even though it did come in a loss. But again, you're seeing him right around 150, 200 yards every game. So the statistics don't look good. But when you look at the Giants, yes, they are 2-4. But again, Jaxson Dart is really 2-2. And then you look at the 4 games he had played. He played, in my estimation, 3 playoff teams. Again, with 3 pretty tough defenses. Then obviously he plays the Saints as well. That was kind of just a disaster. They started off hot. Cam Skattebo put the ball on the ground. He made some mistakes. But I just think, again, when you look at New York football, and we've seen the amount of quarterbacks come from New York and go to other teams and have success, whether it's Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, and obviously Baker Mayfield with a similar story as them. I've always said it, like, again, do I think Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold were the problem necessarily in their situations? No, but these people are drafted in the first round. Again, Jaxson Dart wasn't a top 10 pick, but these people are drafted in the first round to make a change to the organization. You want to change the organization, bring new life. I get it, the guys that we have had in New York in the past weren't necessarily the problem, and they've had success in better situations. But you are drafted to make a change for the organization, to uplift the organization. And I have really seen Jaxson Dart do that. And even necessarily not even on the offense. I feel like this defense has more life to them playing for a guy like this as well. And Cam Skattebo has looked really good. I'm not 100% sold that Cam Skattebo will be the long-term answer within 5 years of being the Giants starter running back. But he has brought life, obviously, the way he plays the game. When you see him going 150% on every down, that brings life to the offense as well. Now, the play calling has been a little limited with Jaxson Dart, but I think, again, when you look at the defensive line, defensive front they have, the running back that's playing hard in Cam Skattebo, what they have on offense now as pass catchers with Malik Neighbors obviously having that gruesome injury, I don't mind it. And then I feel like Jaxson Dart is making the most with his legs and on off-script plays as well. After the plays and everything breaks down, I feel like he has looked really good. So, again, I feel like Jaxson Dart has been pretty solid, and I feel like what the stats don't necessarily show the whole story because, again, how he's able to uplift this team. And, again, the group that he has played within these 4 games, like we have said, the Giants' schedule is tough, but you really couldn't have got much of a tougher 4 games to start. And, again, he's 2-2, even though the Giants are 2-4. What do you have to make of this situation, obviously being a Giants fan?
So first, I'd like to say the Giants are 2-5.
Oh, 2-5.
But I appreciate you shaving off a loss. Um, yeah, honestly, like, and I know we went back and forth a lot over how they should handle it at the start of the year, and I still I still think what I said was valid because we've seen teams in the past take that approach where you have the veteran start and then you put in the rookie, and that's kind of like what the Giants did way back when with Kurt Warner, and then you transition to Eli. But based off of now, obviously it's easy. It's easy to say this now based on how things have played out. But I've been so impressed with Jaxson Dart and how he's looked that I it's almost like you would have liked to have seen. I would have loved to have seen him just start week one. Then, like if he was going to look like this, then and obviously, yeah, he's turned the ball over. But in the Saints game, I mean, 5 straight times, and it wasn't just him turning the ball over. It was the receivers and Skattebo fumbled, and then you had the interception at the end of the game. Well, not the end of the game, but as the Broncos were making that comeback, that was a tough spot for him. To make that play. I would have loved to have seen Jaxson Dart start the year, and it would have been interesting to see where the Giants would be at right now. And you also brought up, the limitations with the playbook. I mean, I think part of that is also with what he has around him. I think the Giants have done a great job at utilizing the tight ends. I mean, now we've seen Daniel Bellinger get involved. Theo Johnson's made plays. It's really unfortunate that we're not going to see Malik Neighbors until next year. It would have been really nice to see that tandem kind of evolve as the season progresses. But, like Wan'Dale Robinson is still making plays. I've just been very impressed with what I've seen out of Jaxson Dart. He is the real deal. And, his attitude, like, it doesn't seem like the moment is too big for him. Like you're playing in a hostile environment against the Broncos, and that is not an easy place to play. And now I have to say I was out for most of this game. I did catch, of course, the comeback in the fourth quarter. I did come home for that. So that was the part of the game I actually did watch. So that was great. But, like he continues to make plays. He's a very good runner. He doesn't run into sacks. I just think he's made for this. And the Giants have really needed this kind of player. And you add that you add Cam Skattebo now to the fold too. Like, yeah, the Giants have really been missing this kind of attitude for a long time. They've really needed this. And it really does go to show you that, if you have an offense that you trust, and believe in, that is going to put up points, the whole team is impacted by it. Like it's definitely made the defense play better, although I think the defensive coordinator should have been let go after this past game against the Broncos, because that's now 2 games this year that I think he's a main culprit in why they lost, based off of, how they set things up, towards the end of the games. But yeah, like I go back to when the 49ers first traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, they didn't make the playoffs by any means, but they were going to have like one of the worst records in the NFL. And then Garoppolo ended up taking over as the starter for like the final 5 or 6 games. And they finished like 6-10, and they had like 1 win. They had 1 or 2 wins at one point. And one of them, of course, was against the Giants. That was Ben McAdoo's last, one of Ben McAdoo's last games that he coached as for the Giants. So, like, I kind of related to that. Like, you put in the young guy, and it just gives the team life. But having said that, though, the Giants just continue to lose games in ways that I just have never seen before, and a part of me is like a little worried that Dart and Skattebo are going to get engulfed by that. But there is a side of me that actually does have more confidence that they're going to be they are part of the solution, but they are going to turn this thing around, and this team is going to be a problem. And it's just unfortunate that they lost this game on Sunday, because you look at the division, like if you win a couple more games, like you're in it, and they beat up on the Eagles. They should have beaten the Cowboys. And again, like If Dart was playing like this and he started week 1, who's to say they could have beat Washington? Washington really didn't do that much to beat the Giants because the Giants couldn't do anything. They would get in the red zone and Russ would be throwing the ball over the receiver's head, or they'd try to run a play where they got to tackle running a route. Like, they couldn't score. So, that's also something you got to think about. But I'm impressed by both of them. Skattebo, like I said, I'm in agreement with you that I don't think he's going to be like, he's not going to be, like an Adrian Peterson, like he's going to have like this super long career where he's going to be the number 1 back. Like, they still have Tyrone Tracy there, who also had a rushing touchdown on Sunday. So you're going to kind of have like, I've been saying it's going to be like an Ahmad Bradshaw, Brandon Jacobs type deal, which is fine because the Giants won 2 Super Bowls with those 2 guys. So, and Bradshaw was at the game that we went to, Dart's debut. So that's kind of how I see that playing out. But and I'll say this about Skattebo, like I said, like he's not like a Saquon Barkley, he's not a Christian McCaffrey, but he's a tough runner. He's a very good blocker too, and he fights for every yard, and that's the kind of thing the Giants need. So they're heading in the right direction, even though they're still losing games, like I said, in just unbelievable ways that you couldn't even fathom. But they just continue to do it. So hopefully they're rounding the corner and they're getting away from this bad era of football. But it's going to be interesting what they do with Brian Daboll, what they do with Joe Schoen after the season, depending on if how many more games they win, which I definitely think they are going to win some games. But is it going to be enough for these guys to keep their jobs? More so Brian Daboll, because I think Joe Schoen has done a very good job with these past 2 drafts. Although you could also say, well, look at how he's handled the kicking situation, because for some reason I don't know why the Giants haven't figured that out. But I think it's more so on Daboll, and that's why there's all those clips of them on the sidelines, him and Dart. Like, this is his key to saving his job. So.
Yeah, I think especially with Shane, when you look at the draft picks he has had, especially this year when you could say his job was on the line, and you have Jaxson Dart, who most people think are going to be your franchise QB. You have Abdul Carter that has looked great, who we barely even talked about, and then you also have Cam Skattebo, who's looked good. Like, this draft class has looked really good. I think it would be very, very hard for them to fire him after that. If everything stays like how it is now, or maybe even increases where like everybody does still remain to look good, I think it would be very hard to fire him. And I think the Giants have, we said in the beginning of the year with the defensive line, and then like I believe in Jaxson Dart and Malik Neighbors, like what they have right now at their core, I feel like, again, you're going to see, just like you've seen in the last 4 games where they have really stuck and had impressive wins, or again, stuck with an opponent like Denver and ended up losing. But you're seeing the makings, I feel like, of a team at its core that's going to look impressive at times this year. And then next year with, again, maybe an added offensive line piece and another weapon, and you bring Malik Neighbors back. Hopefully he's fully healthy. You're going to see a team that has the core to be a really good football team. Like you're seeing, I feel like, the buildup of it right now. For Brian Daboll, again, I'm not a huge fan of how he coached the end of the Denver Broncos game. Again, Jaxson Dart did have a crucial interception in that game. But at the same time, I feel like I hate when coaches necessarily, like, do what got you to the moment. Like, I feel like towards the end of the game, they were trying to just run clock, and that didn't really end up working out, obviously. And it was just, like, not even running clock. Like, they didn't really use Jaxson Dart's legs at the end of the game. It was just Skattebo up the middle.
Yeah, it was a lot of short runs.
Like, eventually, I feel like, again, I know you want to run the clock out, but you were just giving Denver the ball back, especially a good team like Denver with a good quarterback like Bo Nix and a great coach on the other side. It's like, when you have that play calling so predictable, and I get it. Like, again, it was like an historic comeback. They scored whatever, how many points, 30-plus points in the fourth quarter. But, again, I'm a little questionable on how that play calling was open up. Like, I think you got to still remain to do what got you to that point. They were just trying to run the game out. It obviously didn't work. We could, like, debate the end of that game to the end of time. But Jaxson Dart, Cam Skattebo, even Abdul Carter, all have looked great. And I really think Joe Schoen is definitely going to keep his job. And I think it's even looking good for Brian Daboll as well because, like, again, you could argue like a lot of the draft classes weren't necessarily his guys. Now these are all like his guys, and they have all looked impressive again. You could see either way because we know at the end of the day this year the Giants aren't going to be a winning team most likely. So again, there's always the outcome of both being fired, but I think their jobs look a lot better than they did going into the season.
Yeah, no, that I would agree with.
So that wraps up the New York Giants again. Cam Skattebo, Jaxson Dart, I feel like their impact again goes a little bit more than stats, especially the way Cam Skattebo plays. The uplift Jaxson Dart to give them